Alright, today I'm going to do an oxygen device scenarios. So the first thing I'm going to do is check the patient's chart, and I see that in the patient's chart that the doctor would like them to be on just a supplemental oxygen, just at a lower flow. So I'm going to start them off with a nasal cannula at 2 liters per minute. So here I have a nasal cannula, and so always before I place any oxygen on a patient, I always need to make sure my hands are clean, and then I also need to get the pre-vital signs before I place on the oxygen, and that I have the correct patient. So once I have all those things attained, I'm gonna go ahead and set this up, make sure the tubing is okay and not kinked. And so I'm gonna put this on and put it at 2 liters per minute here. And then I'm gonna make sure I can feel that there's a flow coming out. This is just a supplemental, so it's just to help them kind of get their oxygen levels, keep them level there. So once we have that placed, I will always give it a few minutes and make sure I retain the vital signs after they've been placed on oxygen and make sure everything is still staying at a good level. And then I will come back here later and check on them. All right, so I'm gonna go out. And then I have got an order that the patient has had some secretions that have been starting to come up. And so I'm gonna do, the doctor had asked to do a nasotracheal sectioning. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue to oxygenate the patient, but I'm gonna put him on a non-rebreather. That way it hyperinflates their lungs. That way I can get a good suctioning from the patient. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shut the oxygen off, take the oxygen off the patient, make sure this is off of the patient, and remove it. And I'm gonna set this in a safe place because they'll need to be placed back onto their supplemental oxygen. So I'm gonna get their non-rebreather mask ready. Now with a non-rebreather mask, you always need to make sure the bag inflates before you place it onto the patient. So I'm gonna get this set up. I'm gonna get it at a liter flow where it begins, about 8 liters per minute would be good. Just to get that bag inflated, that way it'll start to oxygenate, hyperinflate their lungs. So once that bag is inflated, I can place it onto the patients here. And then when I do this, I just gotta explain to the patient I'm changing their mask just because I need to make sure their lungs are hyperinflated. That way I can get in there and suction out those secretions that they aren't able to get out themselves. And so when I'm ready, then I would take this mask off. I do a nasotracheal sectioning, and I replace and put this back on. That way it gets that oxygen back into the lungs. And then I will slowly remove this from them, and I will place back on their nasal cannula when they are ready to be placed back onto that nasal cannula. And then, good. And so then after I have checked all the vital signs, they're back on the nasal cannula, and then I always need to chart what I had done, that I had changed to a non-rebreather, just so that way I can hyperinflate their lungs and let the doctor know that I got the nasotracheal sectioning done.